Good morning. It is Thursday, January 21st, 2016. This is your morning edition on i24 News. Coming up later today, 4 months into a wave of attacks, Israel's army produces a complex profile of the lone wolf assailant. We're going to take a closer look. The globe's wealthy and powerful convene in Davos for the World Economic Forum. And later on the show, we're going to hear the personal story of a rape victim who tries to offer support for others like her around the world. Good morning, I'm Yael Levi, and we begin this morning in the West Bank, Israel, and a turn in the violence plaguing it. For the last 4 months of near daily attacks on Israeli civilians and soldiers by Palestinians, Israel's defense establishment has been collecting data in an effort to form a profile of the likely assailant. Now, yesterday, Israel's Army Radio, an established news source, broke a story about a major new study supposedly done by the IDF into the motives behind the attacks, a profile, if you may, of the assailants. The research sought to find out what drives the young Palestinian to take a knife, a gun, or their car and try to kill people, as more than 150 have done so in the last several months, according to Israeli reports. To find out who is the new lone wolf, as they call it, terrorist, described by the Army Radio as an in-depth and comprehensive study, the findings dispel some of the most common assumptions. It says that it's not politicians, it's not religion, and it's not affiliation to a terror group, nor is it incitement. Often, the study says, the source of desperation and alienation lies closer to home. With it, the death of or arrest of a relative or neglect and abuse at home. Social media and incitement play a role, but not in a direct top-down way, according to that paper study on the Israeli Radio, often described by Israeli politicians. So, the following report has the details. Let's take a look, break it down from there.
Israel has blamed the recent wave of violence that hit the West Bank and much of Israel proper on incitement and propaganda by Palestinian leaders.
The Palestinian Authority should be told squarely to stop the campaign of incitement. That would help a lot to stop the current wave of terrorism.
But Palestinians have long cited Jewish encroachment on Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa compound as one of the main triggers for the uprising, adding that welling discontent and frustration among the youth led to the rise in lone wolf attacks. And now the Israeli Army Department dealing with Palestinian territories seems to agree. Kogat released findings Wednesday concluding 4 months of research in the West Bank, saying that contrary to opinions among the Israeli upper echelons, attackers are motivated less by social media content and religion, and more by familial and personal reasons.
Well, the profile put together, that was Gabi Weininger's report, maybe we'll get back to it later. The profile put together by the army spells bad news for Israel, because such attackers are nearly impossible to detect and thwart in evidence. But it's even worse for the Palestinians. In terms of pure numbers, many more Palestinians have died as a result of the wave of the attacks than Israelis. And while the attackers succeeded in their goal 29 times, in most of the attacks, the victims suffered only minor or moderate wounds, while the assailants were shot and often killed either before or after the attack. In addition, the attacks have brought about punitive measures by Israel, like the recent decision to ban Palestinian laborers from working in the settlements. Support for the attacks in the Palestinian public is also very troubling, for none more so than their leaders, because it signifies a deep discontent from their current state. With me in studio is member of Israeli Parliament from the Likud Party, Amir Oוחנה. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Also with us, former Shin Bet, that's the General Security Services in Israel, agent, an advocate, Gunen Ben Yitzchak. Good morning to you. But before anything else, let's go first to Ramallah, live to Ramallah, where we're joined by i24 News correspondent Mohammed Al-Qassim, standing by, standing by, I believe it's at the Kalandia checkpoint. Mohammed, I want to ask you, because you and I have been discussing this for quite a while over the course of the last 4 months, but this paper study, so to speak, by Israeli Army Radio seems to paint a picture that actually doesn't completely take away responsibility from the Palestinian Authority, but talks about individuals taking the law into their hands without any type of agenda in many ways.
That's correct, Yael. This basically dispels the facts or dispels the theory from the Israeli government that says that these young Palestinian attackers basically are motivated by their association with Palestinian factions such as Fatah or Hamas, or maybe also by incitement from the Palestinian Authority, mainly the Palestinian president, as well as maybe Palestinian TV, footage on Palestinian TV, what they hear on Palestinian radio stations, as well as social media. Also, it takes away from the Palestinian Authority theory that this is maybe these attacks and attackers are motivated directly by Israeli activities in Jerusalem and in the West Bank and the Palestinian territories. What the finding says that these Palestinian attackers, young Palestinian attackers, probably are feeling disfranchised, they're feeling marginalized, and they have issues either at home or basically taking revenge attacks for what the Israeli army and Israeli security services have done to their families and their friends. We're talking about a generation that we've called before, and maybe you and I, Yael, have discussed. This is the Oslo generation, exactly, which basically feels left out and disconnected from from their own government or from the Palestinian Authority, as well as from the Israeli government, and they are taking these steps on their own.
And when you say, and I want to touch with you on that, Mohammed, because you call them the Oslo generation, these are young kids, and as the report, you call the report in progress describes, young kids that are so disaffected. But what does it spell about the Palestinian Authority? They have lost faith in the authority as well?
Of course, yeah. This is basically what they've told us. We've covered these demonstrations since they started in early October of last year. And the majority of the Palestinian demonstrators, the young Palestinian people we've met with and we've talked to, they said that we lost faith in the Palestinian Authority and we don't take orders from them, nor that we take orders from any Palestinian faction or leaders of these factions. We are out here, as they said, to do what we feel like we have to do. The Palestinian Authority, according to these young men and women, failed, in their opinion, in their minds, in achieving a lasting peace, in achieving what they were promised as they were young, and that's what they heard since they were born, that a state is coming, a sovereign state for the Palestinian is coming in the West Bank and in Gaza with its capital in East Jerusalem, that the economy is going to flourish, that they are going to have a bright future. And they don't see a bright future. As you can see, we are here at Kalandia checkpoint, where Palestinian school children and university students and workers have to spend hours before they cross into Jerusalem or into the West Bank. So for them, they felt that they had to take matters into their own hands. Another point that I must talk about, that there was a report yesterday from a meeting done with the Palestinian Chief of Intelligence, Majid Faraj, which he doesn't conduct or do a lot of media interviews, and he said since this new wave of violence started, the Palestinian Authority and its coordination with the Israeli counterparts have stopped at least 200 attacks, 200 probable attacks by Palestinian, what could have been Palestinian attackers. Right. This spells any rumors or any, saying that the Palestinian Authority will stop its security coordination with Israel.
But that is still going on, which may be the only one of the few remnants of the Oslo Accord, so to speak, is that, or the process that was that coordination between the security coordination between the Palestinian Authority and Israel. Mohammed Al-Qassim, if you can stay with us, because I want to start in the studio actually with you, Mr. Gunen, Advocate Gunen, you're former GSS member yourself. When you listen to a research as such, a work in progress that is coming from the Israeli Army radio. I want to state it very clearly. We don't have the paper report, but this was reported yesterday on the IDF radio, that there is no real connection or not a direct link from any type of incitement. These are young kids that basically are just doing this on their own accords, not affiliated with anything. What can be a strategy to combat that when it comes to the Israeli security services?
Well, I must say, first of all, we need to be careful because I didn't see the paper, I didn't read the research. And there is another thing, and the fact is that most of them could not be interviewed because they've been killed. So whatever we have...
Most of the assailants.
Most of the assailants. So nobody really had the chance to sit with them. These are young kids. I would say, you know, take a psychologist to sit with them and understand that. Of course, most of them didn't survive. No,
and I think one of the last attacks, which is terrifying. I think it's a 15-year-old kid, right. 15, killing a woman in front of her children, yes. Is sitting down with these kids and trying to figure out what is going on. But when you're looking at that, if that work in progress, so to speak, as reported by Israeli Army Radio, what can be a strategy then of security services to combat this?
I'm not trying to escape the question, but I must say that I disagree with the idea that is stated in this paper, because I'm following the Palestinian social media and the amount of propaganda especially from Hamas and other small or bigger groups is tremendous. Now, young people are sitting either at home or any internet coffee shop in their villages. They read, they see what people are posting on Facebook, and they get the idea that they need to go and do something. We saw it when they started with the hit and run attacks
of the cars.
And then later on with what we face now. So saying that this is only like a personal problem or problem with their family or society, I just don't. I don't agree with this, and I think that this is a very immediate and maybe easy solution, but actually there is much to do, more than just going and looking for young children that had a fight with their fathers.
Knesset and Parliament member Amir Oוחנה, I'm actually going to jump off what Advocate Gonen here said and ask you, because you sat in my studio before. We're friends, we may disagree on opinions. But one of the things Advocate Gonen said was that it's hard to quantify this work in progress, so to speak, because one needs to sit with these young children who are perpetrating these attacks, but it's impossible because most of them are dead. Because they are, either gunned down by civilians.
Thank God for self-defense.
Thank God for self-defense, but they are children. I mean, we can all agree that they are children. They're young kids.
15 years old 12. Just murdered Daphne Meir in Othniel in front of her children. I think, and he's alive.
He's alive.
Sadly, he's alive. I would rather him dead at the spot, of course.
If we were, though, to look at the fact that the age of these children, okay? The age of these children, you have children, I'm assuming.
These murderous children.
Murderous children, yes. But children nonetheless. Children nonetheless, because, one has to wonder what makes a kid what makes a kid.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Okay.
First, I would have to agree with my former colleague as to the reasons. And let me suggest another idea. When you pay bonuses and salaries even to the slaughters of 2-month-old Hadass Fogel in her bed, you are inciting to murder. When you call buildings and streets after our biggest murderers, you are inciting to murder. And I'm talking about the government buildings in Ramallah are called after Yihya Ayash, who is responsible for the murder of more than 100 Israelis. When you go all the way to Turkey to shake hands, and I'm talking about Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen himself, all the way to Turkey to shake hands with Amna Mona, who murdered 16-year-old Ofir Rahum from Ashkelon, you are, and accept her as the hero of the Palestinian people, you are inciting to murder.
No.
And this is incitement.
No, but I'm asking about incitement then, because on the other side, and let me play devil's advocate, when we're looking at the Wabsha family and when we're looking at the process that essentially took so much time to bring the perpetrators, also young children, Jewish young children, burning down a house that's killing a baby, that I'm asking what also brings a young Jewish man, a young Jewish man to go and perpetrate a crime as such.
First of all, this is horrible. This is horrific. And it was condemned, I think, by all of the spectrum of Israeli politicians. Unlike what you heard yesterday from Jibril Rajoub, who says these murders are the crown on our heads, the Palestinian heads. This first of all. Now let's take 1, 2, 3, 5, 6 Israelis that for 30 years have murdered Arabs, and they are terrorists. Let's take them 6 and let's try to compare to the thousands of Palestinians who murdered Israelis.
Quantifying in numbers is something that, you know, is usually done. I still
it's
think
uncomfortable, right?
No, it's not that it's uncomfortable. I don't think that deaths should be quantified by numbers. I think we need to look. I think that we need to look at the agendas and the ideas behind that and the similarities.
We don't call streets after Israeli murders. We don't do that.
We don't call streets after Israeli murders, but is that incitement is the one thing that one needs to ask themselves. When we're looking at incitement, would we say, Advocate Ganin, I'm asking you, you know, in that respect, can we make that direct linkage to the administration in the Palestinian Authority, to those young kids going out, you know, perpetrating horrific murders, horrific murders, but can we make that direct linkage from the authority to a 15-year-old kid?
Yes and no. Okay. Yes, because I do agree with what a member of the Knesset, Oוחנה, said. The fact that they praise death even in the government is something that is unacceptable, and somehow we got to the point that we accept it, and this is something that left and right in Israel should deny and say we don't accept it. This is first. The fact that they get money is something that we have to stop, because yeah, this is also an economical issue. But at the same time, we need to remember, as much as I see it, the last, you want to call it intifada, uprising, whatever it is, I don't know.
The knife intifada.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but...
But that's the problem. We need to know what it is. Isn't that the case? We need to know in order to solve it.
Well, yeah. Yes, and I think it started in East Jerusalem, and it started in East Jerusalem after or even a few days before the murder of Mohammed Abu Khdeir. There is a different problem in East Jerusalem. This is where it started, and in East Jerusalem we have a problem, and we need to decide. The Israeli government needs to decide, what are they? Okay, what are they? If there are citizens, let's make them citizens. It's not easy. I don't know if I support it, but they live between two countries.
No man's land.
Yes, and so what can the Palestinian Authority do with those people when we don't want the Palestinian Authority to go into East Jerusalem and work there? Okay, we try to stop them. The Israeli government doesn't give them what any other citizen gets, and this is a huge problem. They look at us. They live with us. They work here because they have a blue ID card. Okay, they are not citizens; they are permanent citizens, residents. But they can't get what we get. They look at us, and they see the prosperity of Israel, and thanks God that we live in a great country. But they look at us, and they are angry, and they want to get it. And this is the solution we need to bring to East Jerusalem. The Palestinian Authority, different story. Connected, but it's a different story.
It's connected, but different story. That said, I don't think we're going to solve it right now. We're going to solve it, sadly, right now, as none of the leaders have managed to do over the course of the 20 years and the short time that we have. I want to thank you both for being with me in studio, and of course to Mohammed Al-Qassim, who's with us in Ramallah. As we said, an interesting piece of paper that many people will disagree with, but it's out there as we move along.